Film Diet Podcast.
And then it's just sequel after sequel after sequel.
There was no character development at all.
Just that on pure technical levels.
There are filmmakers that don't want it just to be an entertainment experience.
Hello and welcome to Media Academy Online.
This is Film Diet Podcast.
And today we are going to begin podcasting on Star Wars, the franchise.
And we're going to be jumping in, talking in depth about each episode.
Yeah.
And focus on the story, focus on
The characters.
The characters. We'll also talk about the history a little bit.
Yep. Just anything and everything Star Wars, really, isn't it? And just sort of, just really go to town on it and just sort of say our two cents. Where to start? George Lucas.
Talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to go into a lot of things that have already been gone into heavily. Like, I don't want to repeat, like, let's say, Red Letter Media. I don't want to repeat so many of those YouTube guys and documentaries and all that. You know, I don't want to sort of just repeat information. But I'd like to sort of have my spin on it and sort of go into my feelings and my thoughts and how I kind of see it after watching all these things. Since Star Wars is probably my most important personal film. Yeah. Well, the original trilogy were probably my most personal and beloved films growing up. I think they really changed me as a person and sort of expanded my creativity and my imagination.
Impactful.
Very impactful. And I couldn't find anything else that compared to the enormity or the expansive universe that was Star Wars.
And that's the thing, when it originally came out, it really did shake the industry and pop culture in that way because it hadn't been seen before. We had other sci-fi things that had come out prior to that, but this was the first time they used modern technology for the time in a way to enhance the storytelling and create, as you were saying, that universe that really sort of gets you involved and takes you in and takes you for the ride. And it really opened up a lot of people's imagination. Yeah.
It was almost like it happened at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
There's so many different elements that sort of go into the first Star Wars film getting made and through that whole process to it being released and then it being a beloved piece of art, you know, across the world in such a big way. It almost became the blockbuster, if you will, I think, you know, before E.T. and before so many others that followed after it. This one was really the one that really created a craze, like the Beatles or something. It's almost like Jaws, like it's almost like a follow-on from Jaws, and that sort of was building up momentum, that idea of having a film that could generate so much hype.
Yeah, a must-see.
Yeah.
That you just need to Google and look at photos from back then with the queues that would come out of the cinema to see that film.
Yeah.
It's something that it's hard to sort of imagine. Before that, there wasn't the same sort of craze as big as or bigger than the Marvel films that come out today. Yeah. But before that, it really didn't hit pop culture in the same way. And really brought a new generation of filmgoers and started film in a new direction.
And I think that's the thing about, like, at the right time, because you just had the hippie movement and we had the darkness of the 70s and what was going on there with the Vietnam War and all this sort of...
The world was very serious.
Yeah, and a lot of films were reflecting that. You know, we had Exorcist coming out, even Jaws came out, we had Godfathers, a lot of criminal crime film, you know, French Connections and... You know, the list goes on and on and on and on about through the 70s about these directors creating, like Taxi Driver, you know, Martin Scorsese coming up, you know, with these just reflections of society being depressing and, you know, I think the world was dying for something just to sort of show them the colourful side of life again and, you know, just to take them away from it and give them this...
a breakaway.
A fairy tale, you know, that a modern day or futuristic fairy tale, if you will.
When the film was getting made, that's why the studios, they didn't like the idea. They were like...
Doesn't surprise me.
They were like, this is like a Western in space. This isn't going to work.
You just got like Westerns in space and you got like these weird samurai guys with laser swords and you've got, you know, these weird alien dudes and you've got, you know, just these weird ship ideas or whatever it was, you know. It's just when I'm sure if you read it on paper, like these... producers or studio heads would have been looking at. They just would have been scratching their head like...
Yeah, and back then there was no context to this, like, what had come before that kind of
Buck
stuff.
Rogers and, Flash Gordon's and,
Yeah.
the stuff that George Lucas was inspired and influenced to sort of utilise these elements. But that's what was known.
Yeah.
Was these corny sci-fi films, and that's what was known throughout the industry, is that sci-fi basically means not good. And I think there was only one film, or there's been a couple films of sci-fi that were actually decent, but they weren't massive fairy tales.
Yeah.
They were like Planet of the Apes, which was another reflection on society, which was another big franchise. Like,
The Time Machine.
The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. We had War of the Worlds, I think, would have come out well and truly by then. And the other big one, 2001: A Space Odyssey. But that was definitely more going on the realism side and spiritual side. That was kind of exploring humanity and what it means to be, or this sort of thing.
Yeah, a bit more art house.
Yeah, and a bit more higher art, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think Star Wars was just that sweet spot of like, okay, there's all these ingredients. Like with any piece of art, you're influenced and inspired, and you're utilizing all these things that you like, pulling them together to make your own tapestry out of all these things.
Yeah.
And I think that was the perfect recipe for a film. And to be honest, George Lucas started the recipe, but it was his crew and cast and everyone that worked on the first film that finished the recipe and made it special. It's not just on the shoulders of one man, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. It was the beginnings of ILM.
Yes.
As we know them today.
And that's the beauty of George Lucas too, because he's the one that was the guy that allowed this to happen, this shift in the industry, and, gave ILM the chance, built that company just to be able to make effects for this film. Yeah. And that's where they began. And then we've got, so many other things like that after this. Like he even, I think, helped with Pixar as well and stuff like that.
Yeah, Pixar was a spin-off from ILM.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So George Lucas, say what you want about the man, a lot of hatred and vitriol has been spewed at the man since the prequel trilogy, and him tampering with his original trilogy, as well. It's only been pretty much negative vibes towards old George Lucas. Yeah,
but I mean, if you look at what he's always tried to do is try and stay current, and I guess his revamping of old classics was an attempt to keep it current. Obviously, he didn't understand the audience weren't after that. He was probably trying to get a younger audience that might look at it and say, "Oh, this is just old. This doesn't really..."
Exactly. And I think that was the thing. Like, he's kind of caught in a rock and hard place there, because Star Wars, when I was growing up, was dead. Like, I'm talking...
It was,
I'm talking early 90s. Like, I'm born 88, and then I'm not familiar with Star Wars until, 93, 94, 95, around that time. Star Wars was, so under, out of the peripheral, out of sight. And the only place you'd kind of see Star Wars is at garage sales and comic stores.
And it felt like very adult. Like, it wasn't really a thing that kids would really be interested in.
No, like even me as myself, I remember looking at a lot of those things, the toys or just all the stuff from Star Wars, the video games, the toys and all these things, and thinking, I liked some of it, but a lot of it did feel like from a bygone era. Yeah. And the thing I did attach myself onto were the Ewok movies, because they were kid things. Yeah. And they were done much later than the original trilogy, and they were just basically kid films. There was a cartoon and there was 2 movies, Battle of Endor and Caravan of Courage. And I grew up watching those religiously. Like, they became my rentals from Blockbuster that I'd get all the time. Yeah, I'll talk about them a bit more as we go along, especially Return of the Jedi. I'm going to crank back to the old Ewok thing. But so I've got a massive history with Star Wars. So many people do, and that's something I found out as I got older as well, because it was always that question when you got to school or into your new grade, or you're trying to make friends, and it's like, what's your favourite film? And I'd always be like, Star Wars. That was my way of sort of finding myself, who I was as a person, growing up and being an artist and wanting to be an artist and wanting to use my imagination and creativity to sort of you know, just to draw in my free time and just to be creative, like. And I think Star Wars really supported that. Let's get into, so A New Hope. Before it was dubbed A New Hope. So they went back and retrofitted that name to it. Because it initially was just Star Wars. And this is the whole debate because did George Lucas intend it to be a long franchise? Like 6 episodes? Was it meant to be 3? Was it meant to be 1 film? I actually think he did have ideas of wanting to make numerous films or stories, but not knowing much about that. I think he had a loose idea and probably thought, I can't fit all that into this first story, maybe I'll make more. But I'm not counting my chickens. So.
Because I mean, for him back then, he's got everyone saying it's not going to work. You've got new technology that's never been tried. You've got new technology that hasn't been shown to an audience. There's a lot of things that this could have been a failure.
Oh, big time, yeah.
And so you could be right in him having ideas, but you have to be able to start off with a film that can stand by itself. You might have the hope that there might be successes. You might have a new hope, shall it be? Might be.
I mean, some of his ideas as well were bad. Like he had, I can't remember now, because of that bad, the ideas he had, but the original script was like Luke's name even was like, what was it, Luke Starfighter or something like that. We had Han was like a lizard creature. It was just like the ideas he had at that time were definitely not, because it takes more than one person to kind of create something that's really good, especially when a canvas so large. Like it really does. Like you can't just sort of create something in a vacuum and have all these great ideas. I mean, eventually, if Han was a lizard man, I'm sure that could have turned out to be interesting, you know, if you had other people working on it with George. But it kind of took a lot of people to shape and mould this idea George had. He had the big ideas and he had this vision of sort of utilising, you know, samurai western, Flash Gordon-y, you know, all these sort of things thrown together. But it's kind of like, how do you create the characters that are strong and that last time, you know, and are really strong and all that sort of stuff. The names of places and names of characters. Like it's all, it all takes work, and it's not just, it never just comes down to one person, you know. Like I just have to stress that point that it's not just George in this, you know. Like Star Wars was created by everyone who worked on that film, and it really was a collaborative effort because they were under budget. They were running behind schedule. George was stressed out and he got sick. He got hypertension during the shoot. Like he was basically not having a good time through this whole filming process because they filmed on location in the desert and, you know, the heat. There was a lot of struggles. Every bloody corner they were going down was met with struggle and problems. But this is what makes something even more special, I think, because it forces them to create ways around and just to go, okay, well, that's all we can do on the day and we're just going to have to deal with it, and that's it.
Well, think about any film that's been successful. They all have their issues. They all have problems, and that's what film, full stop, really. You'll always have these issues that you have to overcome. Usually those issues that you have to just make up on the spot. You can have so many happy accidents, and sometimes it makes the films better. You can, if you have certain films that go along too easy and everything just works perfectly, you know, sometimes that's not always a good thing.
Can create like almost a stale thing, something that's just not. Humans by nature, we, you know, there's a thing called human error, you know. We're not robots. If films were made by robots, they'd be so clinical, like the Marvel films. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But you know what I mean? Like it's all these new Disney films. They're very, like, funnily enough, Star Wars is a part of that. And that's the problem, because you're not getting that human error overly. You're not getting that.
Well, that's the thing. Disney have got their filmmaking down to a fine art. Their process is rock solid, which on one hand it's great for making films on time and on budget, and on the other hand you get what you expect. And
to be honest, it hasn't really worked out for them with the Star Wars to this point. Like Marvel, yes, that's gone through the roof and everyone loves it. 99% of people out there have seen one of those films, if not all of them, and like them. Whereas Star Wars is not the same. It's such a positive and negative push and pull kind of thing that they've had going, because it's so beloved and it's such an important franchise to so many people, and for them just to think that they can mess with it and sort of just release stuff without really making sure that it's right. And like, they've had problems like we're just talking about, but for Disney to have these problems that they've been having on the Star Wars films, there's a lot of warning signs and a lot of red lights flashing, because, you know, there's been a lot of directors fired off, say, Solo. Directors were fired off that. You had Gareth Edwards from Rogue One, who got sort of let go during the post, and they did reshoots, and it's just a lot of retrofitting going on there to, you know, and I feel like it's not coming down to a vision or an agreement of a team to say, okay, this is the story we want. Yeah. Like, even Mark Hamill didn't like the new trilogy that, you know, that's come out. He's spoke out against them a lot, and said that he fundamentally disagrees with how they have portrayed his character and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And I find that so fascinating, because if Mark Hamill wasn't happy with the script I was giving him, I'd be going, all right, maybe we should probably think about this, you know, because something's not right. Yeah. You know, it's not right.
Well, you sell your IP to Disney. Disney are going to make it fit their purposes. Yeah. They're not going to make their process fit
others.
They're going to say, you're going to do it our way.
Oh, there's the door.
Yeah. If you're going to be under our Disney brand.
Which is wrong, you know, for Star Wars anyway, because look at it, the proof's there. That it's been one downward spiral after another. Yeah. I mean, we've had good spikes here and there, whether it be Force Awakens is okay, Last Jedi was horrible, Rogue One was pretty good, Solo was awful. Yeah. You know, it's been up and down. And we'll come back to this discussion a bit more when we start going into the new films, the Disney ones. But I think it's just important for us to kind of have that contrast. Yeah. To see the different studios especially at the time. Like, we're talking the 70s compared to now. That's a 30-odd year gap. That's 3 generations between. But yeah, going back to the 77 film, it's crazy. Like, when you think of that film coming out in 1977, and you look at all the other films that are around at that time, there's just nothing else that kind of is on that same level, on that same wavelength, on that ambition. It really isn't. It definitely calls back to things like Wizard of Oz and these big fantastical fairy tale pictures, especially, you know, like with the very archetypal or archetypal characters like the Luke character, and, you know, very, very strong stuff.
Yeah, from a business standpoint, like Wizard of Oz was a flop when it first came out.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
It took like generations for it to grow in popularity.
Really?
Yeah.
Gee, we probably should look into that one. Yeah. It's a good film. Like, I have seen it a few times, but it's just one of those films that it amazes me when I look at it and I think, gee, that got made. You know, when I see it, it's probably one of the only musicals that I can watch. That and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Which one's the good one? Willy Wonka.
Yeah. No, is it? I don't know either.
Yeah.
Charlie or Willy, whatever.
Yeah. The good one, the old one.
The original.
Yeah. The non-Tim Burton one. But yeah, anyway, if Star Wars was a musical, that would be interesting.
Just talking briefly about things like Wizard of Oz, like the thing that was so great about those is its simplicity. They would have a set and they'd paint a backdrop and that was it.
That's cool.
And they just looked amazing.
Yeah.
Those backdrops.
Yeah.
They felt like they went on forever.
Yeah.
But when you've got them like running across the Yellow Brick Road, they're almost hitting their face in the backdrop.
That's so cool.
But it's the same kind of, you know, with Star Wars. We've got a problem. We've got a vision. Yeah. How do we make that happen?
Yeah. Such a big one. And it's like, I don't know how you're going to do that, George.
And this is all analog. This is all before After Effects. You can't just chuck in layers.
Oh my God, the old editing and all this stuff. Oh, the cameras, everything. It's just insane what they achieved, you know, at that time. And I think that's why I almost hold this first one up the most. Yeah. But it's taken me a long time to do that, because this one, when I was growing up, was probably the most boring and just didn't quite sit as nicely as the other two did. Like Empire and Return of the Jedi just fit together very nicely. They just lead into each other and it feels like nothing's changed in between. New Hope, there's a bit of a difference there, leading from that to Empire. Yeah, this one's a lot more stripped back. It's very simplified.
Yeah.
The scope is a lot smaller, but it's a great standalone film, and yeah, it's got a restricted scope of the universe with the sci-fi, fantasy, and fairy tale concepts. But yeah, they're very simplified. They're not overly complicated.
Yeah.
But they have the potential to be expanded upon. Like, it's a good, solid framework.
Yeah. Which is a good lesson for a lot of films. Like the successful ones, you think about them. They are a simple story, like Harry Potter, something like that, or Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Easy to understand. There's room for expanding on.
Yeah. It's like you don't throw all your eggs in the basket straight away.
Like, you think of other ones that haven't been so successful, like how they keep bringing out these new franchises that might only have one
installment
film, and then it goes because no one's watching it, because they try and throw so much at you and so much lore in it that you just, there's too much to take in.
Almost burns it.
Like Peter Jackson's new one.
Oh, Mortal Engines.
Yeah,
man.
Which there was a lot going on there. Warcraft. It's like all those kind of films. They're a big CGI fest that just kind of, they don't focus on characters much. No. They don't start small. Yeah. They'll just skim across that in the first 20 minutes, and then it's a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
For instance, like Lord of the Rings. It's a long film, but in terms of what actually happens, there's not that much that happens.
No, it's basically what happens down in the caves in the Dwarf Mountain. That's when, I guess, the main part of the film really happens.
Yeah. And
then the battle after that. But before that, it's a good hour and a half of establishment.
Yeah, which is perfect. That's what a lot of films need.
And that is my favourite one out of all of the Peter Jackson, Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, is Fellowship. Yeah. Is because of that. Yeah. It really gets you prepared and into the world, and there's a big sense of mystery. And I think that's the same with Star Wars. You know, it's this setting up mystery and intrigue without giving you too much. And your creativity and imagination sort of just goes from there.
Yeah.
Like the intro scene, for example, like, I think it's one of the greatest startings to any film. For a 1977 film, it still stands up today. As soon as the text crawl has gone up the screen, you've got the Star Destroyer that just comes over the top of you with a battle, you know, with this rebel ship as well. And they've just seen the scope of this ship, you know, and it's it's a fantastic way just to sort of show the audience the stakes, the good and the bad, straight up visually. It's like visual storytelling at its best, because there's no dialogue. It's just all music, and it's just sound and spectacle. Yeah. You know, and you're in it. You're like, okay, fuck. You know, this is happening, and I don't know what's happening, but it's fucking great. You know.
That's why we're on the subject of score.
John Williams. Yeah, this is the thing, because like even John Williams on this film, it's quite different to the rest.
Yeah.
Like his themes and the songs that he has composed, you know, in this first film, they're slightly different to Empire and Return of the Jedi and the rest after. They've got this very 70s, you know, almost Fantasia elements to it as well. It's I don't know how to explain it, but it's just got this different feel to the music, alongside of the well-known themes like the Imperial March and stuff, obviously, that carried on after this film. But there's a lot of other songs in the soundtrack that are just very mysterious and evoking alien worlds and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Strange. It's very strange and unique. But I think it's just brilliant, you know. It just provides the perfect backdrop to expand and fill in your imagination. But yeah, the film just oozes with mystery and intrigue, you know, because you just kind of like, oh, what's beyond that? Oh, what's over there? Or what's, you know, you're always sort of wanting to see past what the camera's showing you. Such as like, all right, this is an interesting thing, because you're following the droids, the two robots, from the start. You know, after the Vaders come on board this ship, and it's a wonderful introduction to his character and seeing them kind of come aboard the ship and kill all these rebels, and then trying to find Princess Leia, or trying to find this, which Rogue One came back to, the information to the Death Star, how to destroy the Death Star. And that's a very iconic scene as well, seeing Leia putting that disc or whatever it is into R2D2. Just that scene alone, and this is the thing, like it really had these real iconic scenes that are just beautiful, and I think there's quite a few of them in this film over the others, you know.
Yeah. And that's a very, just talking about the robots for a second, I always looked at it as a very clever way of thinking about what robots could be. You've got one that's a person in a suit.
Like a humanoid
android thing, and you've got another one that's effectively remote controlled.
Yeah.
It's cool to see that they just tried different ideas and threw them together, and it portrays what a robot could be in a very creative, different way.
Yeah, so then again, like C-3PO, for example, it's got that English butler thing. Oh, yes, I'm C-3PO, da-da-da-da, you know, human cyborg relations, or this sort of thing. And he came up with that.
Yeah.
The way he moved, the way he talked. So this is what I mean when it's not just George Lucas that created Star Wars, because you've got all these other players that come into it with these ideas, and it's just it all fell into place.
You got one that talks, one that just beeps.
Yeah. And you got the guy Ben Burt, the guy who does all the sound effects for Star Wars, who came up with the idea for the lasers, you know, who found all these sounds.
Yeah. Yep.
Wonderful Foley artist, you know, and the beat boops.
Yeah. Stuff that's been copied ever since.
Yeah. And to have a character that just beat boops without any subtitles or even knowing what he's saying, that's pretty cool. Like
it lets your imagination go wild.
Yeah.
Opens comical moments.
It does, yeah. It's like the pre-Kenny from South Park, you know? You're always wondering what that guy's saying, and it's like, you don't need to. But yeah, you've got these real interesting shots as well, like the part where the droids actually disembark from the rebel ship and they're in the pod and it ejects. And there's this like rotating camera shot of them in the pod. And when I was rewatching it, I just thought, there's some real interesting shots that you don't really see from a lot of films, even to this day. Like, it's very art housey in ways as well.
That was the days they were really experimenting, because this was the first time we had moving cameras.
Right, yeah.
With those kind of miniatures.
Yeah.
With moving cameras.
Yeah.
Which meant to have multiple miniatures or have huge war going on with multiple ships. The only way you can do that is by reshooting a scene one after the other, which means you have to have the camera do the exact same thing over and over again. So you'd move it, you'd have a miniature, you put it in one place, and then to create another one, you'd move that miniature, put it in another place, and then you'd superimpose all of those shots together to create the army.
It's pretty...
And that technology didn't exist. They built that from scratch.
That's pretty insane.
So when you talk about things like, you know, the camera angles, that's because they were trying new shit because they could. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Because George set them up and got them working.
Yeah.
And,
And it was because they were hungry too. They were hungry to learn and do new stuff.
Yeah.
And having a team that are willing to do that.
Go above and beyond. Lucky. Yeah. Very lucky. Yeah, so like I just think it's interesting, like this film alone, because you're following the droids for like the first act.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy because like what other film does that? Where you're just following these two almost insignificant characters.
In the desert. Just
in the desert.
Walking if you want to call it walking, and just moving around.
Yeah. And it's just the music, the desert, and two robots.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what the hell is going on?
One talking, one beeping.
Yeah, and they're arguing.
Half a conversation.
Yeah, and it's just like, what? And then you come across, they go into that little chasm, and then there's these things called Jawas.
Yeah,
the little guys, you know, in hoods, and it's a wonderful way to save on money as well, and you know, just having guys in robes covering them up, and it makes sense in a desert, but like just the idea of these Jawar characters, and then Tusken Raiders are the other ones, and they're both just covered head to toe in like robes and shit, and it's just you don't know what's under that, but it doesn't matter. It's cool. It just evokes more mystery, evokes more imagination.
Gets you more invested.
Gets you more invested. These days they'll be showing you flying creatures, insectoid creatures, and this and that, like they did with the prequels. And it does nothing for you.
No.
You know, it doesn't really, you know, get the imagination rolling.
Spending more money.
Yeah, exactly. And these scenes are very quiet as well, and they're just, and it's just the vistas of the desert as well on that location. And I think that just speaks volumes for this film in particular, because it's a small film on a big canvas.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd like to sort of bring up is, how Darth Vader is kind of different in this film compared to the rest of the films, because he is almost like a secondary villain in this film.
Yeah.
Underneath Tarkin, Grand Moff Tarkin, who's the old guy running stuff on the Death Star, and he's ordering Vader around like he's the Emperor. You know, there's no Emperor in this film. It's just Tarkin and Vader, and Vader's almost like the right hand of Tarkin. He's the enforcer character. He's going around, or he's not even going around really. He's just, you know, he's got that presence, and you just assume that he's the guy that's going around fucking shit up. Yeah. Under orders, but
military guy.
Yeah, but as time goes along, he's the one that sort of ends up becoming the uber villain, you know. You got the Emperor, but Vader's the one, really. And I think he even flies the TIE fighter at the end, you know, and he's in that dogfight at the end, Vader, you know. Just to think of him in a TIE fighter now, it's just like, it's weird when you think about it. Like, not for the character so much, but just the idea of having Vader in a TIE fighter, you know, just like another soldier, you know, it's quite strange. And then we get to Obi-Wan Kenobi, Alec Guinness. He's a classic actor, you know, very respected. So respected, and I think he is the actor that gave this film weight. You know, he's the one that sold the idea of the Force to the audience. He's the one that sold the idea of Jedi and basically Star Wars in general, because everyone else is very sort of amateur-y. Like Mark Hamill's amateur-y as an actor, Princess Leia, you know, Carrie Fisher, she's new, Harrison Ford's not in it yet, but he's new to filming and acting as well. He's been in stuff, but they're all pretty green, I suppose. Whereas you got a veteran actor like Alec Guinness that just comes in, does subtle performance, and just evokes even more mystery.
Supported by his iconic costume. Something that sort of very recognisable. And
it's almost become the uniform for Jedi. Like, it did become the uniform for Jedi, you know? Just this one design, you know, whether that was intentional or not to be the uniform for Jedis in future, but it's just awesome. And the way he just is introduced and just makes that sound effect to scare off the Tusken Raiders. I guess these days they'd probably have a fight scene where he'd just jump in and cut a few Tusken Raiders up, you know. In this film, he just plays this weird sound effect and like walks over to him like, you know, like a creature, and they all run off. It's funny, but it's just different. It's almost like, we can't afford to do a fight scene. Dennis is too old. He's too hot in the desert. You know, this is not happening, you know. So let's
what do you want to do, mate? Oh, that'll do.
And it's like, do you reckon there'll be a sound effect we could use? I don't know. Let's just hope for the best, and Ben Burt will come up with something. But you get that whole scene of Obi-Wan meeting them, and you know, he's like, I never remember having a droid, you know, this sort of thing, and you're just like, what the fuck, you know, because like, you know, when you watch the others and you look back at this film, it's like all these ideas obviously weren't concrete, and it's kind of like they have to retrofit pretty much a lot of the stuff that comes out in this film, like even him describing Vader to Luke, and he's like, he killed your father. All this sort of stuff, you know, like he's not your father, basically. He's saying he killed your father. Which I, wholeheartedly believe that was the case. Like, and I was imagining, imagine if this was the only film that ever came out and there was nothing else and Vader was never Luke's dad, you know, that never happened. And it was basically, that's all we had. And when I watch the film, I actually think about that. And I think, well, imagine if this was the only film, you know, imagine that. And rewatch it with that kind of perspective, and it just kind of, it's strange. It's a strange thing to do because it kind of just makes you think like where they went with it, how much they retrofitted and all this sort of stuff. But it's just interesting, like, to look at it with that perspective. Almost like a kid would for the first time when they're watching the film and they just have no context for anything really, let alone the franchise. It's just what's happening on the screen at that time, and you're just kind of taking it all in. And like, I don't know what this is or that is, but whatever. I'm enjoying it. And then you get the introduction of Han Solo. Obi-Wan takes Luke to Mos Eisley spaceport, and you get introduced to that famous bar scene with all the aliens in it. And with that song, din, 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 din. You know, it's so, you know, pop cultured now. It is like, it's, everyone knows it. But when you watch that scene, like, I know they retrofitted and threw in a few extra creature designs here and there of like little parts that they threw into that to extend it. But some of those designs of those creatures are creepy. You know, they're weird and just strange. And then you get the bartender saying, like, to the droids, we don't serve their kind in here. And it's just like, well, it's not like he's going to drink anything. He's a fucking robot. But is that the idea they had, that they were treated like slaves? Were they like this, you know, they weren't treated like aliens or humans. They were just...
It did feel like that was...
the intention.
Yeah, George Lucas's way of trying to reflect in society. Try and shoving that in there, even... though it felt very disconnected from society. I guess that a lot of the inspiration comes from
at that time
life.
as well, I suppose, is on the zeitgeist, I suppose. It's in the mind. And I think that was a really cool little part, because it just makes you think more about it, you know, and
it allows more avenues of storytelling in the future and gives it more depth and allows people to think about the film a lot more.
Yeah, you do. You're just like, whoa, what does that mean? You know, like, does that mean all robots are outlawed and not treated equally, or they're just treated like shit, or, you know? And then you get, you know, Chewie, awesome character, and Han Solo, like, need I not say anymore, Harrison Ford, one of the coolest dudes to ever grace the screen, and like... I know I wanted to be Harrison Ford, you know, you know, and my brother did, and you know, you're just watching this cool dude, and he's a badass, you know, and that was the whole thing about him shooting Greedo, you know, like that guy, Han shot first, that whole thing, which they changed because they didn't want Han Solo to look too much like a bad guy, which pisses me off, because that's his character, and that's the whole idea. He's changed by the end of the film. He's got a progression. He's got an arc, you know. He starts off like a swarmy, bit of a nasty guy, and by the end of the film, he's good as gold, you know, and he's the most friendliest guy who'll back up Luke anytime, you know. And then they changed that one moment, and it just kind of it hurts. It hurts. Makes me just want to watch the original version without the special edition. But it looks so bloody crusty these days. You're watching it, it's so grainy, and it's just so old school, and you're just like, there's a good version in between those two. So yeah, the next great scene I want to kind of just quickly discuss is the Imperial scene, where they're all kind of squabbling. Because you don't really get this kind of thing in any other film after this one. Like, you don't really spend much time with Imperials or learn how their hierarchy works. Or you don't really see anything beyond, let's say, not the cockpits of the Star Destroyers, but like the bridges, you know, on the bridge of the ships. You don't really see anything else. This is in the Death Star, and it's like a meeting room, like a boardroom, and they're all kind of arguing with each other, and Vader and Tarkin walk in the room, and they even start squabbling with Vader, and they're kind of like arguing with Vader, and Vader's just like, does the Force choke. First time a Force choke's kind of really... happened, you know, and he's choking him without even putting his hands on him, and it's just like, that's bloody cool, you know. And that's another reason for why I guess Darth Vader became such a strong villain and everyone loves him, because he's just so cool. I think that's just an interesting scene just to sort of look back on and go, well, you don't see Imperials just doing their sort of job, you know. You know, you see them either on the bridge of a ship or giving orders, but you don't really see them squabbling with each other and all this sort of stuff. It's just an interesting little thing, I thought, when I was rewatching it.
Well, it's a good point. Like, if you think about it, it feels like everyone is just so... They know what they're doing, and it all's like a well-oiled machine. People have no personality, almost robot-like. How it is all like, you know...
even like what you're saying, that's how I feel like Imperials, unfortunately, like the officers and stuff, are written after this film. They always just serve that order purpose, where they're either taking orders or giving orders. It's none of this kind of internal squabbling, and you know, they're not really fleshed out as much as they should.
They're not as human.
Could be. Not as human. And they just become like almost like stormtroopers are, where they're just like faceless. They just serve no more purpose really, apart from just those moments that they do. And it's just like, I wish there was a bit more in the in the other films about it. And then you got the scene of the death of his Uncle Owen and his Auntie Beru, and the skeletons on the ground burning. You know, they're scorched in a Star Wars film. You know, I think that's just, it's horrific, and it's awesome too, because it just ups the stakes again and makes you think, wow, these guys they will fuck you up. You know, and unfortunately you don't really see them fucking anyone up. You know, stormtroopers just miss. But on that one instance, they burnt these two corpses to a cinder. And it just, I mean, it plays its part in the story, but you don't really see anything after that that's as horrific, I think, in any Star Wars film.
That's a good point. stormtroopers almost feel like
A joke.
They're just like those clumsy.
So can they even
painters.
see out their helmets? You know, because they're not doing a good job. You know,
they're like, you know, they're IQ of 1 almost.
Yeah,
where they're painted as though it's just
bumbling fools.
shocking.
Yeah, I know. It is really bad, and
Like,
that's yeah. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
They're just not a threat, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and there's so many of them.
Yeah, there's so many.
Why wouldn't you be better off having half as many you have?
Yeah.
Better
Train
at their
them.
job.
Yeah. How about quality over quantity? You know, come on, Emperor Palpatine, get your shit right, man. You know, he's gone the China route. He's just going cheap.
They're squabbling too much.
Yeah.
No direction.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think we'll get to the negatives, but that's definitely one of them. Stormtroopers just being, or the Imperials just, they're either threatening or they're just totally not threatening. And it says
they're existing for the sake of existing.
Plot contrivances left, front, and center. Yeah. One of the biggest negatives of most films. But anyway, the next bit, the scene where Tarkin tricks and snivels and destroys Alderaan, Princess Leia's planet, where her family and royalty's from. Her adopted parents, anyway. He's like, Tarkin's like interrogating her. It's like, where's the rebel base? And she's like, on Dantooine. And he's like, well, that's good. I'm going to destroy Alderaan anyway. Yeah. And she's like, what? No, you can't do that. And he's like, yeah, well, you're far too trusty. You know? And that's just awesome. I love that. Yeah. Good character, you know? And Peter Cushing, the guy who plays Tarkin, just like Alec Guinness, they're the two veteran actors that just give this film weight. The next funny scene I kind of want to discuss is the garbage pit. Yeah. When they go into that little garbage chute after they rescue Princess Leia off the Death Star, and then they go into that little fucking pit of garbage, and it's just it's funny because Luke gets pulled underneath the water, and he basically, you know, comes back up in the same spot, and like Harrison Ford's like trying to find him, and it's just so like, it's so dated, and it's like not even, I think it's as deep as like their knees, and it's like, where's he going? Like, I'm sure they expanded upon that in a book or a comic where it's like, oh, he got pulled into this tunnel by this tentacle creature, and it just just does not look like that. You know, he looks like he's held his head underwater for a moment and then shot back up again. You know, it's just, it's funny. You know, we can laugh at it now, but you know, it's.
Well, I guess it's one of those things where sometimes you try things and try and make things up on the go.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that.
It doesn't always work.
Yeah. I mean, it looks good, like the pit and all that, but I don't want to go into every scene because that's just, we're going to be here all day. But the final battle, the Death Star, trench run, you know, you got the X-Wings flying into the trench run, and it's the music's ramping up, and you got, you know, the Death Star about to come around the planet to destroy the rebel base. You know, the stakes are high as ever, and it's just like, oh my god, this is happening. This ending is actually one of the best climaxes to most films, in my opinion. Like, it's just 101, how to do a film climax right. You know, it's basically, this film is how to do it right. Yeah. The dogfights and the way the X-Wings are just getting bumped off and the Y-Wings are getting bumped off, and Luke's friend Biggs is there with him and he gets bumped off, and shit starts getting real serious. The score changes, it gets intense, and then you get Obi-Wan doing his little, what do you call it, Jedi talk, you know, and he's like, use the Force sort of thing, and then he shuts off the computer, and then basically shoots the missiles and destroys the Death Star.
A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on. And I mean, the Harrison Ford character comes in as well and sort of saves Luke at the last second, and he gets the shot in.
Well, it's a handbook for climaxes for the future, really, because before that, climaxes weren't they didn't put as much emphasis on them. Yeah. And they didn't put as much, I wouldn't say effort's probably not the right word, but enough focus on trying to develop a climax that has a lot going on and can really draw you in. Films are a lot slower, and they'd have more of a overall steady arc, rather than having films that we're open today that ramp up to a large climax, and then die down. It was first time, as I said, it's the handbook on, from this point on, developing large franchises, how to get an audience involved in those final stages of the film.
Yeah, instead of falling asleep, you kind of you're back awake again, and You know, and then when it's over, you're like, damn, I want that to keep going now.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, one of the best endings and explosions at that point in time. You know, it's have a big celebration, and it's just like, oh, you feel good. And it's like, oh, cool, movie's over, and I'm out. You know, it's just it's done.
Yeah.
You know, you get the big celebration at the end, and it's over. A few negatives that I'd like to sort of discuss quickly, and there's a funny part. Like they even like say the word like the Star Destroyer when they're trying to shoot the X-wings. They're like, our turret guns can't target. They're too small. Our turret guns can't target the X-wings.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, you got a space station the size of a moon, and you can't even take out a little squadron of fighters. Like, you wouldn't design that into your, you know. It just makes me laugh when I think about that. That's one thing, and the other part is when they're hiding on the Millennium Falcon, and they have to send in that scanner team to go to scan the ship, and they're hiding on the Millennium Falcon when they get pulled into the Star Destroyer, and they send in a couple of stormtroopers in there with like this big box to go scan the ship, and it's like these days they just scan it before it even like docks. You know, they don't know if there's life forms or not on the ship, but it's just funny. Like the ideas they had then are definitely changed now. The CGI for the special edition, for the most part, is dated.
Yeah.
There's a few parts that I think work, but for most of it doesn't.
Well, that's the first one that I saw was the
special edition.
Yeah, that's really who it was made for, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
A newer generation.
And it got me back into it in a big way, so it worked for us.
A lot of the old people who saw the original were completely against it, which... nostalgia is a big thing. Completely understand, but I guess it did its purpose as much as people
got it back into
psyche,
pop culture again. Yeah, more games, more comics, more books.
Yeah,
it needed that resurgence, and then we got the prequel trilogy not long after that. So it kind of got us ready for the next lot. Yeah. To be disappointed, really, but we'll get into that as we get there.
It seems like there's a lot of cycles. It was huge, and then it died down, and then it came back again, and then it died down again. Yeah. And then we have this new resurgence that's happening now. Yeah, yeah. Where Disney's at the helm, trying to push it. Yeah. As much as possible. TV show. We've got the TV show with Disney Plus. Yeah. We've got Star Wars World in the Disney parks. Yeah, the theme park. Yeah. And Kevin Feige has just taken over the reins of Star Wars for the future. Yeah. So, he's the guy that is the head honcho and guy that made Marvel happen. Yeah. And they've asked him to take over Star Wars. It's going to be very interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. He's a guy that had a lot of power when he was working in Marvel. He's done a lot of stuff, a lot of skill, but this is a different beast. Yeah. It, I guess, has a different fan base. Yeah. Where, comic books are different because you've got some freedom. Yeah. In how you tell a story. Yeah. And I think most people were just happy to see those characters on screen. It didn't necessarily matter about anything else. That's right. Because comic books are completely different things. But then you look at trying to grow on a franchise that was so loved by so many generations. Very tricky, hard task to do. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, yeah, very interested to see. But yeah, that's kind of my spin on 1977 Star Wars, A New Hope. Very good. And next time we'll be going into obviously Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi, and go from there. Until then, may the Force be with you. Adios.